So we are here with Mike Holloway, the president of Fifth Order Industry, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about himself and why he got involved in this amazing book. He wrote a chapter for it. If you read anything in that book, this chapter is it really bridges a lot of gaps because he talks about music, he talks about philosophy, he talks about chemistry. I don't think you can necessarily see all of those in the same few pages anywhere else except in this book. But what I want to do is I want to introduce Mike Holloway. And Mike, tell us a little bit about what's it like being in your job and in your position. I want to help others to understand it a bit more.
Well, it's actually, it took a really arduous path, but for ever since I can remember, from college on through to every professional position I've held, somehow I've always got pulled into training or teaching or representing the company under for different types of technology or processes and things like that. And you wonder if people just thrust you into things because they don't want to do it or because you're good at it. I don't know. The bottom line is I always felt comfortable trying to help others understand more complex ideas and breaking them down into manageable bites of information that can be easily digested. That being the case, regardless if I started out as a bench chemist, then worked over to an engineer, and then got into marketing and sales and eventually doing a lot of writing, I've always been involved in this concept of not only STEM, be it science, technology, engineering, and a lot of math, but also getting involved in instruction, developing competencies and training, things like that. But there was always something underneath it all that really, I would have to say, enriched. And that had to do with the art side, which unfortunately, a lot of folks in STEM don't have the STEAM. So the STEAM is the A, right? It's the art form.
Miss it.
And it's and the reason being is that typically, and I think in a lot of times in education, we get pigeonholed into our strengths, and they don't focus on, say, the deficiencies as much. And that's kind of unfortunate. And I think sometimes if someone gets really good at, say, technology or engineering or math or something, chemistry or sciences in general, they forget about the other stuff. So they don't develop it as much. Well, growing up, we didn't have much of a choice. We had to develop everything according to the way my family is structured because they just believed in a true liberal arts education. So we started to get, obviously a well-rounded thing. And bottom line is that, I had fun in all of it, and I never wanted to release any of it. So doing that, art is really a form of an expression of one's soul, right? So whether you're writing something creatively, or if you're painting, you're sculpting, if you're building something, you have a concept, you want to manipulate that into a physical form. That's true. That's art. Whether it's writing a poem, writing a sonnet, writing a song, writing a story, or for that matter, sculpting or painting. You're taking something in your mind completely that's just basically just electrons being thrown around, and then changing that, transforming it into something physical that others can witness. And that's always been kind of a cool thing. But the other things that come into play are more of the ideas. And that's where STEM, it shines, but also is deficient in the sense that really complicated concepts are not always grasped by obviously everybody, because you have to achieve a certain level of competency to keep on going up these steps. I never believed that it should have been a step. I think it should be more of a ramp, okay,
Yes.
where it's an easy glide upward. And the challenge is that a lot of times folks who instruct believe it's stepwise, and it's not. To me, it's not. It's a ramp wise. So you just can easily roll up that ramp with a little bit of energy.
Yeah.
Roll up a ramp's easier than to go up the steps, right? So thinking about it like that, that's how I kind of started figuring, okay, what can I do to understand how folks think and then relate to them on their terms, not mine. I'm not the one that's important. They're important. We got to get that concept, those ideas, those things in between their ears so they can formulate their own new ideas and opinions and approaches and application. Knowledge is one thing. Knowledge comes from information, right? But wisdom comes from applied knowledge. And that's what we're trying to do, is achieve a certain level of wisdom. So that's how it all really began. And now Fifth Order, it's like, you're familiar with my company,
Oh yeah.
is that you look at our company, it started out looking at just one thing. And then we just started branching out because people would say, hey, can you do this? And I
Right.
look and say, let's give it a try. And if it worked, I said, well, now there's a new division. Okay, so we
Oh
start
yeah.
a new, so though all of a sudden now we have 12. In fact, we're going to start 3 more divisions in the beginning of the year. And so it's been a fun application of being able to understand how folks think and be able to put good content in their ears so they can use it later on.
Oh yeah, definitely. And that's something that we could use throughout life. Like
Well, yeah.
I love what you said about that in terms of wisdom, because we have to be able to apply it at the end of the day. That's that's where it goes.
Well, it's really the only way we can advance as a species. I mean, we do a pretty good job of screwing up the place, but we also do a decent job of trying to advance our society and our civilization, if you will.
Mhm.
It's a crazy balance.
It is.
We're on the precipice of absolute disaster at any given time, but we're also on the precipice of complete greatness too.
Mhm.
It's such a weird seesaw effect. And right now we're just truly unbelievably balanced.
Yeah.
And sometimes it seems to go one way or the other. But the thing that's been able to allow us to be as successful as species on this beautiful little orb we live on is the fact that we're able to communicate really, really well, better than probably most other creatures. Now, other creatures obviously do communicate to a point, but not to the degree of human beings. I mean, think about it. We not only are verbal, our nonverbal skills to communicate,
Mhm.
but also what we're doing right now. I mean,
Yep.
this is crazy, right? There's nothing else on earth that we know of anyway that behaves like this with this kind of
No.
technology manipulation of the environment, right down to the written word. And
Yeah.
that's the one thing that's really been a huge benefit because we've been able to share ideas and things that basically get lost per generation with other species. I mean, it's often been said if the octopus could give live birth and live for 40 years, they'd be the apex predator.
Yeah.
Octopus typically only live for several years and they give birth by egg and they don't have the ability to transfer that genetic content continuously and that learning content from, essentially from the mother to the child in live birth. The egg birth limits that ability. So they have to relearn everything all over again. It's fantastic, but they're limited in that respect and they don't
Yeah.
communicate with each other the way we do. Now imagine if you twisted that and were able to obviously genetically modify an octopus to be more like us. Oh my God, it'd be a whole other story, right?
Yeah.
So we are kind of fortunate in the fact that our physiology has allowed us to become what we are, because quite frankly, physically, we're no comparison to anything else. I mean,
No.
we're kind of a mess, right? But we do have something that nobody else really has, and that's our intellect. And that's
Mhm.
what the only reason is because we're able to share so much content and
Yeah.
information and learn from it, hopefully.
Yes, hopefully learn from it. So why would you want to write this chapter and, give us this insight into being the chemical philosopher?
Well, it's kind of interesting. And it's, well, first of all, you asked me to do it. So,
Yeah,
friends.
that's true.
friends.
That works too.
So, and I wanted to give a bit of a fresh perspective. And
Mhm.
I knew that in your book, you're real female heavy, which was really a lot of females had written
Yeah.
about, their experiences and whatnot. And you did have several males that actually
Mhm.
participated as well. And I think really in order for anything to be successful, you have to look at it on several different angles.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, it's people all think a little bit differently. And there's definitely a difference between the way, and whether some folks believe it or not, men do think differently than women and women think differently than men. This is pretty much understood physiologically.
Mhm.
And not one's better and one's worse. It's just, this is
Nope.
a different approach. Some think a lot more alike, others are completely dichotomous. So it's a balance. But I thought by contributing to just a few words in your book, it might gain a little bit additional perspective. So others could say, they'd read this and say, I didn't think of it like that.
Yes.
That's interesting. Jimmy Valvano, a great basketball coach, he said something. He gave a speech when he was inducted to the Hall of Fame. He said, and I'm going to paraphrase it. He said, if you get 3 things every day, you'll live a rich life. If you can
Mhm.
laugh, if you can
Yes.
do something that brings you to an emotion that brings you to tears, that could be
Mhm.
sad or happy, and if you could think, just think.
Yeah.
Those 3 things every day, you've lived a rich life.
Okay. Yeah.
And you know what? And I like to think that if we could all do that, I think that it would make us a lot better. Now, if you read about just the few words that I throw down, if it just makes you think, it might not make you laugh, might not make you cry, unless you think, oh
Yes.
my God, why did they even publish this thing? It's horrible. But
Oh my gosh, no, I don't think so.
but if it makes you think, then that's important because if we stop laughing and if we stop
Mhm.
having emotions that bring us to tears, and if we stop thinking, we stop being human. And we
Mhm.
don't want that. That's not cool because
No.
that's what we are. If we stop being who we are, then we're
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah. I hear you with that one. What would you say to actually inspire others to get into the STEM field, male or female?
Well, it's interesting. Every child is born a scientist. They
That's
really
true.
are, and an engineer. They love to tinker. They love to fiddle with things. They love to experiment. And one thing they constantly do, always
Hmm.
ask why. They
Yes,
constantly ask why.
they
And
do.
I know with my kiddos, when they'd always ask why, a lot of times
Mhm.
parents would just, throw it out after two or three set after
Yeah.
asks. That's because that's what God intended.
Yes.
Well, I tell you what if we keep on going, and get to the
Hmm.
point where scientifically we explain things to them as best we can,
Hmm.
and then turn that back and say, that's about as far as I know how to go. But let me
Yeah.
ask you, why do you think butterflies have such big wings? Or
Yeah.
why do you think snowflakes form? And then all of a sudden they start thinking. Now, whether
Hmm.
they're right or wrong, immaterial. What they do is they begin the process of trying to understand and deduce information.
Right.
So I just think it's really, if we can, start really understanding technically, scientifically, mathematically, and even engineering is the applied force of all those things, we start pushing away all the junk that we're bombarded with, and we're actually starting to understand reality in its true forms. We're
Yes.
bombarded with fallacies on a daily basis, but
Hmm.
if we could just question and say, is that really true?
Mm.
And really, let's examine the source. What's the source material? Cite your references. But I always tell my kiddos,
Yeah.
they say something, I say, cite your references. And they'll say
Yeah.
something. I say, okay, has that been peer reviewed?
Yeah, that's the other
So
part.
it brings about. So we really take you tell me, hey, the sky's blue. I look at it and said, yeah, according to a human being, it's blue, but you know what?
Yeah.
It's actually not. It's violet. What? Yeah, it really is. And
Yeah.
the sun, guess what? It's not white. It's green. What are you talking about? Because that's the way we see it. But I can prove
Yes.
by empirical evidence this is what it
Hmm.
is.
Yep.
And so, and all of a sudden, they said, wow, that kind of blows my mind. It
Yeah.
sounds like a conspiracy at first, but I can back it up with empirical evidence. If
Ah,
we
yeah.
don't back up all our things with true critical thinking and applied empirical evidence, we're going to be led down really bad paths. And it's
Yes.
not going to be a very good place to be.
It's
Anyway,
definitely not. But I know we could talk about that for the entire day, though. So many examples of that.
yeah.
That's all we have time for today. But
Hey,
Mike,
my,
I want to thank you so much for just writing the chapter, putting the energy, putting the time in it, giving us that different perspective, because that was one of the most unique perspectives that I've seen in the book. So I really love that part. Thank you for doing that and for doing your parts with us and helping to spread the word and get more people involved in STEM. So
well, thank you very much. It was my pleasure, Sonia. Anytime.
yes, anytime. All right.